and I came in through the other side and crept up on him in the dark.
And just with like a big fucking horrible.
Oh, hell no. I would love to just hear your general thoughts as you prepare to have this album released. I understand that it's been kind of in the works for about a year or two. How are you just feeling as people are starting to hear these songs and start to connect with them?
Um, it's kind of relieving to see the reception of it. I think one concern we had of writing this new material was that there'd been a lot of time since the old material. We wondered if there'd be an expectation of a follow-up in a similar kind of vein, whereas with this release, we've decided to just basically write whatever we thought was good,
Mhm.
what the kind of record we wanted to hear. And I think it's very gratifying to see the really positive and exciting reaction. Seeing people comment on stuff saying, can't wait till the album comes out, can't wait to hear the rest of it. And then to see people talking about the diversity in the songs and especially releasing a couple of what I would call left turns for us, like with Miss Me, which came out recently. Um, had a really good reception to that. And I think that was just very relieving and gratifying. It's also made it a very exciting time for us to know that people are actually now waiting for the album.
Yeah, January 30th, right?
Correct.
Yeah, cool. So you guys, just to kind of rewind a little bit, obviously whatever you're comfortable speaking about. I know the band went quiet for a little bit after the death of George, understandably. So, when you look back at, when you started writing again and getting back together again, what do you think made that point the right time to reconnect? And was there any hesitation there?
Uh, Interesting. That's a good question. I mean, what kind of spurred us to get back together was we got an offer from a promoter to play their festival. It's a festival in England called Burn It Down Festival. They asked us, would you guys like if you were to get an offer to do like a one-off reunion show, would you guys be interested? And that sparked a more of a conversation, which led to me and Joe really getting back together and well, not that we weren't friends, but kind of like focusing our minds a little bit about what that would mean, which led to us then deciding, well, let's if we're going to do a show, we could even do a song. And so we put out a new song just before we were playing that festival called Bury Me, and that was kind of like our, as it were, official return as a band. But it was very much a case of we were going to play this show, we'll release a song, and if we get some more shows, that will be fun. And it was done intentionally at that point. We were like, okay, well, let's do this, but there wasn't much planning or forethought like post that, and as we started teasing the fact that we were going to return, our label got back in contact with us, who had signed us for who had signed us and had released our first album, Life in Exile, and they were like, "Hey, if you guys are back, what are we doing? Like, what do you guys want to do?" Which then also led to us having conversations with our previous management, who we're still close with and wanted to know what we were doing, and all of that kind of just snowballed into Joe and I kind of centering our minds a bit more about what we wanted out of Shields. And it was kind of it kind of happened somewhat by accident, and I'm glad it did because we then locked ourselves away for like 6 to 7 months, 4 months of that just being writing this album, and then the last few months just actually like looking for people to join Shields because our past drummer Alex has a family and he's off living a busy life doing that, and Larry, who was our bassist, was came back with us as we returned, but he also started a family, so he had to focus on that, and so we entered into this period of writing an album, rebuilding our band, and finding people who wanted to join and commit to the craziness that is pursuing being in a band. And yeah, like it was, I don't know, George's death connecting into all of that. I think really at that point when we decided to get back together, it had been a good 5 6 years since George had passed, and I think there was enough distance for his death and the association of his death with the band had kind of like they were now two things. It no longer had the sort of grey cloud that we were experiencing just after his death when we were still because when George died, we were on the precipice of releasing our first album. I think we had dropped one song. I think we dropped a track called "It's Killing Me," and then George passed away, and that was just before we had like a big show with Escape the Fate in London, and it was like it's a harrowing and dramatic time. and and yeah, so like at that point, when we did decide to end, I think we all just needed like the space from Shield, and it was such a fucking horrendous event that we all just needed to go off and kind of do our own thing, which we really did. And it wasn't so much about not being around each other. Like, me and Joe have been friends since we were 11, and we're now both 31. Like, that never changed. And we still cared deeply about Alex and Larry, who were in the band at the time, and we are still in contact with. And but yeah, I think it was enough time had passed, and I think if we hadn't had that offer to play Burn It Down, we might not have thought to do this. But
Right.
it's funny how life works.
Yeah. All about weird timing sometimes. Yeah. So after kind of that hiatus, once you guys started writing this new album, was there, I guess, kind of a renewed energy? And would you say you've evolved at all, like artistically since, before, years ago?
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
I think we came back and it was kind of like coming back into this project, having had huge life experiences and discovered all sorts of different kinds of music from both Sam and my parts, but coming back to it and being big kids again. We were writing like we had done when we first started writing together, and that kind of excitement, that level of energy that you have when you're teenagers, and you have ideas and you're sharing and you're in the thick and you're driven. It felt like that youthful energy was back where it should be, in a
Mhm.
way that hadn't been in like I don't know, like 10 years. It was a long time since we'd written like this. But what we realized is writing like this was something that we could do because we were so compatible based on our level of friendship and the amount of time we knew each other for. Um, it was yeah, that I think that kind of sums it up. We came back with a useful energy that and I think the main thing was that it was an excitement that we came back with. Had we not had the space away from Shields, we couldn't be excited about it anymore, which is
Right.
something we're totally lost by the point of breaking up. Um, when we broke up, everything we did was more or less tainted and colored by the death of George. It was no longer that. Like that had simmered down into something that was more important to us, which was, I guess, the relationship we had as friends and musicians.
Mhm. Great. I'd love to talk a little bit more about the album. You've released several singles at this point, including Miss Me, which is really, really resonating with the fans. And Joe, I understand that was a song that you kind of had private for a little bit with no intention of even bringing that to Shields. What
Yeah.
changed?
Um, I think Shield's getting back together again. That was the thing that changed.
Yeah.
It was a song that I'd just written, one of the ones that you don't choose to write. You do end up just writing because you're in pain and you feel strongly about something and it just falls out of you. Some of the best songs are the ones that happen in moments, and the other best ones, it seems, are the ones that happen from a really honest place that you don't intend on writing. This was both of that. It was a song that I wrote days after George's funeral, and I think I just needed to kind of creatively sweat it out. And then coming back to Shields again, Sam and I reviewed our huge back catalogue of unused songs and demos and this and that. And as we were just being open genre wise with what we were doing with the new material, this was one I just pulled up the bag and thought, well, this is not only something that we could kind of Shieldify a little bit, but also it's relevant to Shields. It's about George, and it fit perfectly into the album, and now sits in a place I wouldn't put it anywhere else on the album. Um, I think putting the band back together allowed me to be ready to release it.
Mhm.
It gave me the confidence to release other songs in the album as well. This is Not a Dream, which is the opening title track of the album, a 4 minute spoken word sound painting. That and again, I just kind of sat down and wrote one night and stayed up till about like 5 or 6 a.m. in the morning. Um, whilst we were writing the album, it was a piece of just therapy, falling out of you. It needs to be written so you can move on. And it was so personal that I had no intention of showing anyone, and was even nervous to show Sam. And I said, I just want to show you this. And I don't know if I'm ready to show anyone, including you, but I just want to show you this thing I was working on last night until like 5 in the morning. And Sam went, this not only should be on the album, this should open the album. And so I think, having the band back together again wasn't just something that allowed me to put Miss Me and songs like that on the album. It was an album that allowed me to move on with my pain.
Mhm.
and process it in a way that I don't think I could have done had it not been for writing music.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a really cool shift in that song, Sam, where you come in and it's really heavy and you sing, miss me, but let me go. I almost feel like that's from George's perspective, or, if a fan's listening, their lost loved one's perspective. Was that part in it from the beginning, or did that kind of evolve as you guys were going?
This was very much the whole song was very much Joe Skeleton. I did not contribute to this song lyrically. So I would give it to Joe to maybe just to explode out, those lyrics a little bit. But yeah, they are very much from George's perspective, I believe. But I will let Joe take the lead on that part of the question. But I my like with actually a few songs on this album. One thing that me and Joe navigated with complete ease and barely even much of a conversation was there are tracks on this album which were primarily written just by me, and there are songs that were primarily just written by Joe. And then there were some songs where we both sort of like pitched in and gave feedback. And there was even a couple songs which were kind of like Frankenstein's, where like Joe had like an idea for a song that he started, and I was like, "Do you mind if I fiddle with this?" And then I'd add a minute of music, then he'd add a minute on. But with Miss Me, Joe had that was very much Joe's baby. I
Mhm.
think I was of the opinion that how the song originally went is that it had this building, building, building crescendo with this sort of impactful shift in energy. But the original shift in energy I enjoyed, but I just felt like we could bring it a bit more into the realm of like what Shields is. And that's not to say like, oh, it needs to be heavy or it needs to have necessarily like have a breakdown. It has got that kind of like feel to it, but I remember when we very much worked on that section together. It wasn't I didn't take it away from Joe. I sat at his computer with my guitar and we were dialing in drum parts and tones and stuff. And I kind of wanted the heaviness of the guitars when it really kicked in properly to almost feel like a march, a bit like these sort of like big heavy chugs are almost like representative of like the six of us, me, Joe, the rest of Shields at the time, George's brother Arthur and his father, all with his cough on our shoulders, like literally marching forward, and it had that kind of sort of pacing nature to it. Like it's all like the whole song is just a build. Even when we get to that like drop and I'm doing this big dramatic singing, it's all crescendoing and crescendoing and getting larger and larger and larger until the sort of finale of the song where I'm just singing the word miss me over and over again and we resolve in this big major key and then it just dissolves again back into how the song started with Joe playing his guitar.
Mhm.
But yeah, I it was I want to say I was about to say it was fun recording it, but it kind of wasn't. Like I recorded I think I did like what I would describe as like the scratch vocals for my bit like with Joe where we were like demoing out the parts and stuff. But when it came to recording my set portion of the singing on that song, I just did it by myself, and I like to do that anyway. I'm a bit of a control freak when it comes to vocal recording. When I'm recording myself, I just want to kind of be in my own universe, and if I want to be there all day, I want to be there all day. If I just want to nip in for half an hour, I just want to be in control of it. And I wanted to do the song justice, and I wanted it to be an emotional performance, but I didn't want it to be forced or faked, and I didn't want to I don't really get bashful about singing in front of people in the studio or live or anything, but I just kind of wanted to be in my own, maybe slightly melodramatic, emotional space when I did it, and I did, and I was I was pleased with the result. Once I would then listen back, I think I recorded it and then got my performance in, and then I didn't touch it until we got to editing. But I would rather that Joe spoke a bit more about those lyrics because I think there's a bit more of a story there that I'm forgetting about where those words came from.
Yeah, I can shed a bit of light on that. The outro of the song from where it gets heavy is actually lyrics that I didn't write. It's lyrics from an unnamed, unlicensed poem that people sometimes read at funerals, which is the poem that George's father read at the funeral. And I remember digging it up, or I didn't actually know where to find it, so I just remembered some of the lines of the poem that it read. It made a really big impact on me hearing it in the funeral. I mean, the funeral was um a pretty hard experience from start to finish, but that bit stood out as a pretty significant part and a very special part. So to take the lyrics, some of the verses of this poem that George's father had read out not only was very fitting, it was also, the song walks in a very linear timeline from the start of the funeral to the end of it. And it was at the end that he read that poem. So it kind of walks us through the motions of seeing him pull up in the hearse and carrying the coffin and saying goodbye to him, and then sitting down on the pew in the church, and then hearing George's father's poem that he read out. Um, and then the space and the air that comes after it, like the diminuendo of the song, the strings fade out, the backing vocals fade out, and the guitar is just there on its own. And it kind of felt like that. You've got like the constant build and the verses and the stages of the funeral, and then the most important part, which was the heavy part of the song. And then, you've got that elated feeling after the funeral is over. It was almost like you're floating after a funeral. Um, and that's kind of what the song is. It's a very real representation of the step-by-step events of the funeral. And to have the lyrics that George's father read out at the end there was, very fitting.
Yeah. What does it mean to have fans just really connecting with this song, especially given the fact that it's not, your typical heavy metalcore song?
Um, I think, I mean, it's lovely. It's really nice. Obviously, which sounds like a sort of pathetically basic answer, but it's just lovely when anyone enjoys, a piece of art or music that you create. I think part of me regrets making Miss Me a single, part of me doesn't, um, because I think we wanted to highlight this song as a single because it felt fitting, and it's a nice. God, I need to find a better word than nice. It felt like a fitting homage to George in a way where I'm not trying to throw any shade at any other band that have experienced something like we have, who have like maybe lost a member or something like this has happened, but I didn't want to capitalize
Yeah.
on George dying, and I don't think Shields really have ever done anything like that where we have. But it is, like everything else, like all of our songs are. None of our songs are about. None of our songs are like invented storylines or like they all come from personal experiences and personal stories, and whether it's some traumatic loss or breakup or depression or whatever, pick your poison. Um, but with like every song we've released so far, we've done the whole, typical thing that is current these days, where we make content and we do these little like mimed mini music videos that are
Mhm.
kind of short little 10-15 second clips with some sort of witty or silly caption, just because that's what you got to do to get people to pay attention to your creations these days. And I said to our label, and we had zero resistance back from them, that like probably not going to be much content around this one. Like, like, I mean, we have a very dark sense of humor in this band, like, anyway. Like, everyone's a target. And I was like, guys, can you, because, we had a single called Parasite, which is the single prior to this,
Mhm.
where Joe looks particularly flash and he's got a slick back hair and like a sick jacket on and a sexy red hollow body guitar. And the caption on the of Joe like playing like a guitar solo, it says like, "I'm gonna tell my kids this was Elvis gently" or something like that. That we were never gonna do that with Miss Me,
Yeah.
like not at all. Like POV, George is dead, some bullshit like that. Like we're not gonna be that fucking band. It would just be ridiculous. And insensitive and hurtful and just dumb. Um, and so there was a part of me, I think, as we got closer to this single coming out, where it was quite a last minute thing. Like we knew we had to film a video, wanted to film a video for this, and we wanted to have that at least. And it was thrown together last minute, but not without care, because I think for me, I just felt like, oh, this is something we have to do. And I'm a bit like, this is not just like filming any music video. It's like, oh, let's think of a fun, sick idea and like a cool location and crazy shots we can have, and then we'll put out like this dope video. again, because of the content matter of the song. And so it was, I don't know, I felt like at times I was kind of dragging myself through the process of it at times. And I'm quite happy the song is out now. And of course, the fact that there's been the type of response it has had has just been warm and positive and appreciative, and everything is great.
Mhm.
I don't really remember what your question was, to be honest. I feel like I've just gone down a bit of a rabbit hole.
You answered it. It was about like the fan response. So one of the things I love just from what I've heard of the album so far, you go from something super emotional like Miss Me to something just crazy intense like Abuser. Can you talk about just like, I don't know, just the range of the album?
Well, I mean, I think both Joe and I have things to say about this. I mean, ultimately, I think when we started writing this album, there was two things we wanted to do differently from the first one, with Life in Exile. Life in Exile was primarily, from an instrumental perspective anyway, was primarily written by me, pretty much in its totality, and it's very much representative of where I was at a musician at the time. I was a little metalcore kid who listened to like Veil of Maya and Born of Osiris and Structures and Acacia Strain and all those kind of bands, and like and or volumes and structures and Meshuggah and all that, and those kind of bands, and you can tell. Whereas this album, neither Joe and I wanted that. We wanted to write something that was completely selfish and very much what we thought. It wasn't about pleasing anyone other than ourselves, and trying to write something truly authentic and something that could stand the test of time, that you could listen to in 10 years' time and it's still objectively good and not just like trendy. The other thing that we want to do differently, and I wanted differently, and Joe very rightly so wanted to basically be far more involved in the writing process. And so this album really was like it was, in the truest sense, it's the most collaborative creative process I've ever been a part of, where it was this album in the result that we ended up with would not exist if you took myself away or Joe away from that process. From even the songs like Miss Me or Red and Green or Parasites, This Is Not a Dream, Death and Connection, any song that Joe was involved in or created from scratch and was completely his, I would chip in here and there, and I say, that's really cool. Have you thought about trying this? Or like, would you mind if I had a fiddle with that? And I'd either be great with an emphatic yes, or a very respectful like, I'm not ready yet, or no, like this is the vision with it. And that was absolutely returned to the same way. For example, the one of our singles, Wolfskin, was a song that I pretty much wrote from top to bottom. And when it got to me recording my final like clean vocals, the more like melodic sung parts of my vocal performance, I bashed it out, and I was pretty happy that I showed it to Joe, who was just sat in his chair across from me where the vocal booth was. And I went, oh, have a listen. What do you think? And Joe kind of just listened to it and very simply said, like, you can do better than that. Like very simply and swiftly. And I remember feeling briefly a little bit like a slight pang of like resentment. What do you fucking mean? Like, it sounds great. But then I did. I went back in and I altered my melody a bit. I changed up the pattern of it, and I'm glad fucking Joe hit me with that, because the result was far better than what I actually did.
Mhm.
So that would have been, that's my answer, and I don't want to eat up the whole question because I know Joe's going to contribute to this as well.
Could you remind me of the question? Because I got really into Sam's answer and got lost with what the original question was.
Yeah, no, I had brought up just how there seems to be a big range on this album between the emotional
Oh yeah.
songs, the real angry songs.
Yeah. I mean, Sam said it almost perfectly. Like I said at the start of the interview, we didn't write an album with the intention of becoming anything other than something that we felt was genuine to us.
Mhm.
Um, and with that came the decision to explore the ideas that we liked as opposed to the ideas we thought other people would like. And um, I think a big part of us writing stuff that had such huge juxtapositions was, I think it was a conscious effort to put some left turns in there. I think it was an exciting prospect knowing that we could write something that would shock people who knew Shields and who had an idea of what we might write from 8 years ago. But we'd both explored so many other influences and genres and styles of music, and just done different creative things outside of music as well, that led us to um play with different ways of writing and different instruments. There's a whole load of acoustic instrumentation on the album that I was able to bring in from my perspective, having a bit more of a stake in writing now.
Mhm.
Um, because I had a whole like folk and acoustic phase, and I was brought up on like bluegrass. My parents are really into that. My father even made a documentary about bluegrass in the Appalachians, and yeah, like I had a whole kind of like bluegrass western thing going for a lot of my life, and I was able to bring that in with some strings, mandolins, acoustic guitars. Um, Sam had explored some really interesting kinds of electronic music that I'm now kind of over the last year and a half getting into. But this was a world of music that Sam had explored that I had not explored myself yet. So Sam brought huge amounts of those kind of elements in, and the way that we approached our production skills were different. And it was a really interesting time just to kind of like see what we could come up with and see the kind of things that we were both into. That fed into the album.
Mhm. Sure. Will there be a bluegrass song at any point or?
You never know.
It's different.
I mean, we're one banjo away from it with the mandolins and the violins on Miss Me. So
There you go.
I really want to do like a very like unapologetically like Meshuggah inspired song. So if there's some way we could do like bluegrass sugar, that would be mental.
Blue Sugar.
Yeah, blue sugar. The blue.
Yes. I saw you guys played a headline show in London last year, and that seemed to be, a really big deal for you guys. Can people expect anything else like that in the near future?
We will probably this year we are going to be trying to focus on like supports as much as possible and getting out on the road and touring basically. I think none of us want to like overplay our hand quite yet because I I don't want to put Shields out to necessarily do like a huge string of headline shows quite yet because I'd rather it was a moment that people wanted and were ready for rather than just doing it for the sake of playing a show.
Mhm.
But the Black Heart London headline show we did at the end of last year, it was a success, which we were all a little bit nervous about. It was the first headline show, especially in our hometown, that we'd done in a long time, and the fact that people turned up and it packed out was just such a privilege that people
Mhm.
care, and that were new people that had not heard us before came down and really were there for our new material as well, which was exactly what any band would want is people to care about the new stuff. So that is and we will do more headline stuff. I think whenever we do another like headline show, especially in London, we want to make sure that every time we headline London, it's going to be a bigger venue each time. And
Mhm.
so there'll be a lot of like internal band politics about what size venue we feel like we want to tackle and when that's going to be and what kind of supports we might want to have and all that kind of thing. That is a conversation we're already having, but that'll just be something people have to keep an eye out for, definitely.
Mhm. Sure. You had mentioned earlier that, when you were in kind of the songwriting process for this album, there was just like a fresh energy about you guys. Did you feel that on stage too?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's a different kind of energy. It felt fresh, but it wasn't in this. It wasn't fresh and youthful in the same way that writing the album was. I think for me, it was more kind of like fresh and matured. Um, on stage before we were like, very different aesthetic. Myself, I think predominantly beard, long hair. And it felt like with this new direction we were going in, we were trying to kind of, I think we just kind of grew up a little bit, but also refined what it is we wanted to look like and the impression we wanted to feel. And for me, a big part of what we do now is showing the audience that you've put an effort in so you look nice. And as a result, you feel nice. Um, I think that delivers a certain air of like confidence, a big inspiration for me, both lyrically and also I think stage presence wise these days is Nick Cave, who is like super smooth and very well dressed and very every decision he makes on stage is very conscious, it's very deliberate, and it's not held back in a single way. And I think performing these days feels like a very conscious effort to be confident in every single movement you do. And that also comes with the fact that we've rehearsed this set to death. We now know each other pretty well. We've been rehearsing for months and months and months. And once you're confident like that in the songs, you have space for confidence on stage
Mhm.
and space for, um, well, yeah, I think space for becoming a bit more of a character and a bit more of a kind of like a show. Um, yeah, that's how being on stage feels in comparison to getting back together. I feel like getting back together was a small pebble rolling down the hill, and hitting the stage at Blackheart was like a good sized boulder just steaming down at full pelt.
Yes. And I have to ask, since we're pop horror, I'd love to know if either of you are horror movie fans, and if so, what is your favorite?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I love me some horror.
Yep.
I actually have an answer for this. So, I've been watching a lot of horror recently because my girlfriend's a big horror movie enthusiast too. I've recently got through all of the Conjuring saga again, which has been fun. I thought the newest Conjuring film, The Last Rites, was I thought it was brilliant. But favorite horror films, I actually I don't know which one of the two are my favorite. My current favorite franchise, and it's still in its infancy, is the Smile films.
Mm,
Smile 1 and 2. I am giddy with excitement for the fact that Smile 3 is in production right now. I cannot wait to see where that goes. I think it's the only it's one of the only horror films where I've seen Smile 2 5 times, and I've seen Smile 1 4 times. And I've shown everyone I've then said, you need to watch this. I've watched it with them, and they've watched it and they've been like, fucking hell, that is so crazy. I guess my honorable mentions would be like The Babadook. That's a classic for me. I watched that again recently. Um, I think both the It films are really good. I prefer the first one over the second. The Welcome to Derry show was actually really fucking cool as well. I just finished that. Um, there's a few more on my bucket list that I want to like rewatch and stuff. But in terms of this is not so much a horror film, but as like and on my rewatches of this as an adult, it's not as scary. But one film that chilled me when I saw it when I was maybe a bit too young for it, even though it's only rated a 12, is a Nicole Kidman ghost story called The Others, uh,
okay.
where well, spoiler alert because I want to talk about it, but essentially she is this woman in this old house, and she's experiencing like things move and like doors, all those classic ghost story tropes. And the big reveal is that she's not being haunted. She doesn't know that she's dead, and all these apparitions she's seeing are actually real people, and she's been the one that's been haunting them without realizing it. And it's such a good twist, and all like the chilling moments and the tension builds. There's no like traditional like like jump scares, so to speak, but there are moments where you're like, my God, that was fucking horrible.
Great.
I
So
have a vague
it's,
memory of you showing me that when we were like 13 years
yeah,
old.
dude, it
Very vague.
slaps. It's
Yeah.
still fucking brilliant. But yeah, sorry, I could go on about that for too long. But
Yeah, also horror movie fan. Not as an in-depth one as Sam, but I love horror. It's one of my favorite genres just to kind of switch off and watch, I guess. But honorable mentions are Hereditary and The Thing. Those would be
Mhm.
my two favorite horrors of all time.
Yeah.
what
Did
was
he
that?
make you watch Smile? Or
I watched The Smile. Yeah, I
yeah.
think I watched it. I think I watched it. We watched it in the cinema. We watched it in the cinema, and I freaked the shit out
Ooh.
of Sam.
It.
We were in a cinema with no one in it, and it was just us two, and we got like the two back seats, and there was an exit on the right side and an entrance on the left side. We only thought there was one door out of the cinema, and I only realized this after I went to the toilet and came back in. So there's Sam alone in the cinema watching The Smile, a horror film, and I came in through the other side and crept up on him in the dark.
And just with like a big fucking horrible.
Oh, hell no.
Joe, what was that horror film we watched together? And it has like the horrible incest monster in it under the house. The Barbarian. The
Barbarian
I
was so
love
good.
that
Yeah.
movie. Yeah.
That yeah, okay. That was an excellent horror.
It was it was excellent, agreed, but what made it good was the realization of what that monster was at the end, and then the son's sympathy that you're forced to feel for it. Up until that point, I was like, I don't really know what's going on, and like it's scary and stuff. But then when you realize what it is, then suddenly it like dominoes, like like I was like, oh, this was a sick film. Now I get it, which I
Mhm.
thought was really cool actually. Like I wasn't like fully sold at first. I was watching it because it was still enjoyable, but then by the end, I was like, oh Christ,
Yeah.
this is bad.
Yeah. I love how it kind of throws you in the beginning. You think it's going to be one kind of movie, and oh my God, it's not.
And yeah,
Yeah.
it's horrible.
Solid film.
Yeah. Yeah.